I've really enjoyed this Joseph series, and I'm kind of sad to say, but we're wrapping it up today. Today's the last Sunday that we have in Joseph. So those of you that know much about Genesis know that there's 50 chapters in it, and we're in chapter 47. So we have a lot to cover. 3 chapters, 4 chapters, 7, 3, 8. What did I say? 47. We're in 47. 47, 48, 49, 50. So that's 4 chapters, right? 3, 4, I don't know. However many it is, we have a lot to cover today. And before we start, I thought that it would be a great reminder to hold Joseph up in front of us one more time and remember that we've been stirred and we've been changed and we've learned and we have grown through experiencing Joseph and Jesus through this story. It's a life of beauty and character and faithfulness. If you had to sum up Joseph's entire life with one word, what would it be?
Blessed.
Blessed, highly favored by God, right? What else?
Faithful.
Faithful. Even when things were difficult, man, this guy, he was faithful to his God. We're going to see today that he never stopped being faithful to God as we kind of wind up the rest of this chapter. Any other words come to mind? Patient? Yeah, imagine. I mean, he waited how long to meet his brothers? How long in prison? How long serving in Potiphar's house? How long serving for Pharaoh? All of this. He just spent a lot of time doing it. It's a pretty amazing life. Any other words?
Purity.
Purity, absolutely. Remember, he said, God is first. I'm not going to sacrifice my values or my character or my integrity, no matter how hot Potiphar's wife was. Right? The guy was strong. It was good. Good. Forgiving. Yeah. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but if somebody betrayed me the way that his brothers betrayed him, it takes a pretty big forgiving heart. And I think the reason that Joseph could forgive as well as he did is because he understood that God had forgiven him so much too, and been patient with him so long. Well, Joseph's life, it's this life of beautiful change that God has been really pouring into him with. You guys can lower that if you need to so that it's not so clear.
It's the blinding like.
It's his Bible. It's reflective, shining right into it. It's like the glory of the Lord. Right there, you see the rise.
Now you can see.
Yeah. So here's the thing. Joseph lived this life of beauty, usefulness to God, and had great faith. And if anything that we could leave this series with, I want you all to know that you also can live a life of beauty. Some of you guys are looking at me like, I don't want to be beautiful. I know that's not what I'm talking about. You don't have to wear mascara or anything like that. Just living lives that are exemplary for other people to follow, lives that reflect the goodness of God, and that's part of being a vision chaser. But we too can live these lives of beautiful lives that people want to emulate, lives that are useful for God. And it doesn't matter where you are, whether you're in a secular workplace, in a home someplace, or in a school. Your life can be useful and used by God. He wants to use it desperately. No matter whether you're in Korea running for world records or, you know, sitting in a classroom someplace. Useful lives. And we all can live lives of faith when we learn how to through Joseph. So, we're going to open our Bibles to Genesis chapter 47. Last week, I kind of mentioned to you to read ahead, to learn about everything that Joseph's doing. We're going to skip some of those verses, but I'll summarize them for you. Okay, remember, they're right in the middle of famine. The Israelites have moved from Canaan, which is the promised land. They've come out. They sent Judah ahead to get directions, and Judah guides them to Goshen. Joseph goes out and meets his dad. There's this beautiful embracing going on, this forgiveness, this restitution of the family. They're all together again. And Joseph says, I'm going to provide for all of you. And in Goshen, good things are happening for the Israelites. But in Egypt, the verses in between where we are and here, up through verse 427 in chapter 47. Hey, Randy, there's a buzzing that's like in my, I think it's coming off the computer. OCD, I'm telling you. I mean, can you hear it? Yeah, it's not just me. It's not, so, anyway, he's going to work on that, and hopefully it'll go away in a second, and I'll try not to let it bother me anymore. It's better. Still not gone. Where am I? Oh yeah, so, leading up to verse 27, the Egyptians are still living in famine. They still are having to go to Joseph to buy grain. And remember, he was set up by Pharaoh. So basically, Pharaoh says, do what you need to do. He collects all this grain for all of these years. And now, living in the famine time, the Egyptians have gone to Joseph and they're purchasing grain to sustain their families. Well, now they've run out of money. So in these first few verses, up to verse 27, they can't afford to buy grain anymore. So Joseph says, well, then I'll take your livestock. So they give them all of their livestock. And then they don't have any more livestock left. So then they're like, well, we'll give you our land. So he buys all of their land from them. So what he's doing is he's accumulating all of the wealth in Egypt for Pharaoh. All of it. And finally, they're out of land, they're out of livestock, they're out of money, and they still don't have food. So they come to him and say, we will work for you if you'll provide grain for us. So the next thing you know, everybody in Egypt belongs to Pharaoh, which is kind of how Egypt got its huge wealth and pyramids and all of that stuff, because basically everybody owed Pharaoh everything. Now, before we think about slavery the way that we have in America, remember that these people were glad to sell themselves to Pharaoh because it ensured that they would have an income. It ensured that they would have food. It ensured that their families wouldn't starve to death. So they were okay with it. In the first 27 verses of this chapter, it says, and they were happy to do it, because they knew then that they would have an income and food. So, it's interesting because Egypt is referred to as the house of slavery throughout the Bible. And this is one of the reasons why. Because the people were indentured to Pharaoh. And later on, again, I'm kind of giving away the ending. Spoiler alert. Later on, the Israelites themselves were captives in Egypt. They were enslaved in Egypt. But for now, they're not. So for now, in verse 27, it says the Israelites had settled in Egypt in the region of Goshen, which is the region of that Ramses that was so fertile and so prosperous that they acquired all kinds of property there, and they were fruitful, and they increased greatly in number. So Israel is growing, and it's moving up, and the Egyptians are selling everything that they have, and they're kind of starting to get a little bit uneasy about this growing thing that happens. So at the end of Genesis and at the beginning of Exodus, you see this incredible turn of events where they're just tired of all of the Israelites. They feel overrun by them. But for now, they're increasing in number. Jacob lived in Egypt 17 years, and the years of his life were 147. So Jacob, Joseph's dad, how many years did he have with Joseph before Joseph was sold into slavery? And how many years did he have with him at the end of his life? Isn't that cool? I mean, I don't know why, but for whatever reason, that's how God ordained it. He was 147 years old when he died. I don't ever want to get that old. I'm thinking 65. I mean, honestly, it's before your body like really starts falling apart. You gotta have lots of surgeries and things like that. I mean, I think 65 is good. I'm like, okay, I'm ready. At 65, you don't have to worry about retirement. Like, spend it all until you're 65. And let's, verse 29. When the time drew near for Israel to die, who's Israel?
Jacob.
Thank you. Why is it Jacob and Israel?
God renamed him.
God renamed him, absolutely. I mean, remember, Jacob means twisted or kind of crafty, because in his earlier days, he's like pulling his brother back in from the womb or something crazy like that. And so all of his life, he's kind of been known as this person that was twisted. And if you're going to build a nation and you're God, you probably don't want it called twisted. All right? Israel's a better name for it. Look it up and see what it means when you go home. So he calls for his son Joseph and says to him, if I have found favor in your eyes, put your hand under my thigh. That's how they used to do it. That's how they used to make promises. Is they would put hands under thighs. and promise that you will show me kindness and faithfulness. Well, we know that Joseph's really good at faithfulness, right? And he says, do not bury me in Egypt. Next. But when I rest with my fathers, carry me out of Egypt and bury me where they are buried. So even though he knows that this place in Goshen is God's provision to build his family into a mighty nation, he's still saying, I don't want to be identified with Egypt. I want to be identified with the promises that God gave me and my family, my ancestors. I want to be buried back home, and home is Canaan, the land of promise from God. So Joseph says, I'll do as you say. Swear it to me, he says. Joseph's like, dude, do you not know me? Of course, I'll do whatever you say. Then Joseph swore to him, and Israel worshipped as he leaned on top of his staff. Close your eyes for a second. Picture a man, 147 years old, worshiping God. He cannot, you can open your eyes, he cannot, you see, you drop stuff when you close your eyes. He cannot stand up straight without help. So he uses the staff to get around. And we're not even really sure if it was like a staff like you think of that you hold in your hand, or if it was the top of his bedpost, or what it was. We're not even sure that he could get out of bed at this point. But for whatever reason, this is the words that we use. But you can imagine this man that has been with God, that God has been with him for a long, 147 years, a long time. Did he follow God all of his life? I mean, at some point we know that God said, Jacob, you're mine. Okay? But for whatever reason, Jacob, his dying actions at the end of his life was to worship God. Let's hope that we're the same. Let's hope that we're the same. Next slide. A few years ago, there you go. A few years ago, I had the privilege of auditing the speed reading class at the Air Force Academy. Have you guys been through that class?
Yes. Good job. Good job. So 1 out of 1, 2, 3, 4. Anyway, I got to audit it, which sounds crazy, but I'll tell you what, it was really, really cool. They have these computers that help your eyes scan stuff, and they have just a really, really great experience because in my job, you read a lot, because I'm not smart. So a lot of the stuff that I get to teach you guys is stuff that I've had to go out and read about, okay? So reading is a big part of my life, and it taught me a lot of great things. So in chapter 48 and 49, I'm going to basically speed read to you. All right? Jacob knows he's going to die. He calls Joseph, and he says, Joseph, come in here. Joseph says, okay, I'm coming. And he picks up his kids, Ephraim and Manasseh, and he brings them with him into Jacob's presence. And Jacob blesses Joseph, and he gives Joseph the blessing of the firstborn. Why is that important? Well, he's second to last born. I mean, maybe, I don't remember exactly, but probably, anyway, whatever the birth order is, he's not the firstborn. Reuben was the firstborn. But if you guys go back and speed read the first part of Genesis, you're going to see that Reuben made some pretty big mistakes, and Jacob's like, yeah, no, you are not allowed to be the firstborn in my family, because the firstborn in my family carries on the family line. And it also gets a double portion of the inheritance. So if you have 100%, the firstborn gets 50%, then everybody else gets the rest. You're the last born, so you don't get anything. Anyway, back to the speed reading part. Okay? So Jacob blesses Joseph, and he kind of installs him as the firstborn in the family, which replaces Reuben. Reuben kind of moves off the thing. But what's interesting about this is then in the next couple verses, Jacob adopts Ephraim and Manasseh as his own children, which then puts them into the family line. And this is important because as you look at Israel history, you begin to see the 12 tribes are the 12 tribes that God builds his nation out of. So wait a second, we got 13 tribes, right? If you add Manasseh and Ephraim to the whole birth order thing, you've got at least 13, probably 14 if you count Joseph, but you can't count Joseph because it passes on to his kids.
And then later on, God sets aside a specific tribe to serve him in his temple and to serve him in the cities that he builds. You know what tribe that is? The tribe of Levi. They don't get an inheritance in the promised land when everybody moves back. So see, even before all of that stuff happens, God's plan is good. And he knows what's going to happen in the future. And he says, Joseph's going to have these 2 kids, but Jacob's going to adopt them, and Jacob does. And in the middle of all of this, Jacob's blessing his sons, and he gets them backwards. So the one that's the older, that should have gotten the older one's blessing, doesn't get it. The younger one does. He crosses his hands when he's going to bless them, and Joseph's like, I get my names confused, sorry. Joseph's like, dude, Dad, you're wrong. It's the other way. He goes, no. This is the way God wants it. So one of the questions that you all get to wrestle through in your life groups this week is, how many other people leading up to this point have been blessed out of order? Don't answer that. Talk about it at your life group, okay? How many other people have been blessed out of order? Because it seems like God's constantly taking the things that we expect him to do and doing something totally different, right? But he's God. The minute you've got God figured out, it's probably not God, right? He's a little bit bigger than us. Anyway, so after that, let's see what happens. So after he does the adoption, after he does the Jacob installation into the firstborn position, then he brings in the rest of his kids. And in each, well, not in each, because they're not all listed in this section, but he walks through their lives. And so chapter 49 is kind of the blessing over each son that he has. But it's not just a blessing, because you read some of them, you're like, oh, dude, he didn't like you very much, did he? I mean, it's almost a little bit of this prophetic, kind of this is what's going to happen. And so as he crosses and blesses Ephraim and Manasseh, he says Ephraim's going to be greater, but Ephraim's the youngest one. And then as he goes through his sons, you get to see things like the tribe of Benjamin is going to be like a lion, like a ferocious lion. If you've never gotten the chance to read it, especially if you're in your 20s, pick up In a Pit with a Lion on a Snowy Day, because it talks about David's bodyguards. And this one in particular that jumps into a pit on a snowy day and wrestles a lion and wins. Okay, lions have 4 feet. You have 2. Snow makes things slippery, and you're in a pit with a lion. And this guy wins, and he's from the tribe of Benjamin. Benjamin, like, for whatever reason, he builds these incredibly strong, ferocious, fearless guys. And he blesses the tribe of Jacob, too. And when you read the tribe of Jacob's blessing, when you read what the tribe of Judah, when you see what Judah is saying, or what Jacob is saying to Judah about the future of Judah's clan, of Judah's family line, it's the one that leads to King David. It's the one that leads to King Solomon, the smartest man in all of the world ever. It's the one that leads to Christ, the Messiah. And what he says about his kingdom is incredible. So Jacob's going through guy by guy, son by son, and saying, you will be blessed for this, but watch out for this. And it comes true later on. It's amazing. So it's incredibly inspired by God as Jacob's standing over all of his sons and doing that. So that's what happens in chapter 49. So let's jump ahead to chapter 50, and we're actually going to start in verse 15 here real quick. Because the first part is still Jacob kind of winding down things, okay? And Jacob dies. I was like, what else happened? Jacob dies, and Joseph goes, he sends word to Pharaoh and says, hey, can I take my dad home? He doesn't want to be buried here, he wants to be buried home. And Pharaoh says, absolutely. And not only that, Pharaoh sends this incredible contingent of officials and leaders in Egypt, and they all travel together. All of the brothers and Joseph carry Jacob's bones back, and they bury him in Canaan. And while they're there, they're worshiping God, and people around them are like, wow, look at that, that's pretty amazing. And Pharaoh's officials go with, because this family had such incredible status and was so beneficial to the Egyptians. Again, that changes in the next couple hundred years. But, so they buried their dad, they're on their way back, or they've arrived back, and this is kind of an interesting sidebar, okay? When Joseph's brothers see that their father was dead, they said, wait, what if Joseph holds a grudge against us and pays us back for all the wrongs we did to him? I mean, they've lived together for how long now? 17 years. Every day for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, Joseph has provided food for his entire family from his own table. He has shown them for 17 years that he's forgiven them. But they still question, don't they? Maybe he was just doing that because of his relationship with Dad. Maybe Dad told him, don't mess with your brothers. And in true fashion of these guys, they kind of fall right back to that place where Joseph had spent a lot of time to see, had their integrity changed, had their character changed, had all of that. Because look at what they do. They send word to Joseph saying, your father left us these instructions before he died. Do you think he did? No. If you have a sibling, my money is on the fact that you've probably twisted something that someone said at some point in time to get something that you wanted in return with your sibling. You don't want to talk about it? Okay. I'll bet I was an only child, which, you know, I didn't get away with anything because you can't blame it on anybody at that point. It's you or no one, right? But if you have a sibling, because I've seen this happen, I've seen it happen, you probably have been like, hey, you know, Mom really wants me to have the last piece of pumpkin pie. I mean, we're coming into Thanksgiving, right? Or, you know, Dad really wanted you to pay for that. Or whatever it is, I have no idea. Whatever you guys, you know, have done, you've probably done this at some point. So we can't be too hard on these guys. They're scared for their lives. All right? Doesn't make it okay. But they come up with this idea, you know. They sent word to Joseph saying, your father left these instructions before he died. This is what they said. He said, this is what you are to say to Joseph. I ask you to forgive your brothers and the sins and the wrongs that they committed in treating you so badly. Now please forgive the sins of the servants of the God of your father. Joseph's like, really? After all this time, you still think that I haven't forgiven you? And Joseph, man, he loves his family. He loves his family. You know how we know? Because every time he sees him, he cries. Right? I mean, you guys have loved someone, and they say something, and you're like, oh, and it brings tears to your eyes? It can be some of the stupidest stuff ever. But you're just so connected and so loving, and when you're like, oh, can I just hug you? Maybe not in your family, but I imagine that you're moved by things that your family might say to you. If you're not, then have kids and watch what changes, right? Your message comes to Joseph, and Joseph weeps. He's like, guys, what are you doing? Next. They come and they throw themselves down before him. And they say, we are your slaves. This has happened before. But Joseph says to them, don't be afraid. Am I in a place of God? You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done. The saving of many lives. 17 years later, guys, we're still talking about the same thing. It's okay. You meant it one way. God used it for something completely different. Am I in a place to judge you for what God is doing? No. I don't hold any grudges. I don't hold anything back. I want you to know that it is okay because God used this in a mighty, mighty way. See, I love his response because what does he do? He points them right back to God. He says, look, guys, God is big. You can trust him. Believe that what he did was on purpose and for a reason. He affirms God. He assures his brother and says, don't worry about it. It's in the past. And he encourages them. be confident. Don't be afraid. God's got this. We can be strong and courageous. It's okay. He affirms God, he assures his brothers, and he encourages courage. He encourages courage. Yeah, that's exactly what I have written down. Encourages courage. Encourages. And some of you may be here today and you need the exact same thing. Listen. You may be wondering, can God really forgive me? Has he? You may have gone before God years ago and said, I've messed up in this area. And for the rest of your life, you've lived in fear of him not forgiving you for that. You might be today in one of those tug-of-wars with God where you leave it before his feet and you're like, okay, I know I'm forgiven for this, and then you pull right back and you're like, I don't know if God could use me. I don't know if it's okay. I don't know if I should throw myself all down on the ground again and again and again and again and again before God because of this thing in my past. I don't know if he's going to make my life beautiful. I don't know if he's capable of making my life useful because of what I've done. Welcome to the club. God says, when he forgives us, he removes it as far as the east is from the west. How far is that? Somebody measure it for me. Because you can't. God loves you. And he wants to get over whatever it is that you're walking around with you from your previous days that's impacting what you're capable of being in the future. He's saying, drop it, leave it, move on. And if once in your life you keep going back to that, you need to let it go, because he has. There are consequences for the things that we've done in our past that probably weren't, his way. But the forgiveness is done. It's paid for, once and for all. Leave it alone. And walk in this new life that he's created for you. Verse 21, so then don't be afraid. I will continue to provide for you and your children. And he reassures them, and he speaks kindly to them. Next. Joseph stays in Egypt along with all of his father's family. He lived 110 years, and he saw the third generation of Ephraim's children. Also the children of Machir, son of Manasseh, were placed at birth on his knees. Pretty satisfying life. At this point, he's worked for Pharaoh for 80 years? Some of you are way better at math than me. Then Joseph says to his brothers, I'm about to die, but God will surely come to your aid and take you up out of this land, to the land that he promised on oath to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. See, one of the things that makes Joseph's life so beautiful is that he allows God to work in it, and he believes that God will keep working through it. Joseph's entire life, I've got a slide for this, let's put that up. Oh, well, let me finish. Sorry. Joseph made the Israelites swear an oath and said, God will surely come to your aid, and then you must carry my bones up from this place. So later on we see in the Exodus that Joseph's bones go with him. And Joseph died at the age of 110. After they embalmed him, he was placed in a coffin in Egypt. Egyptians embalmed, Israelites typically didn't do it the same way. It's a lengthy process. You can read about it in that same chapter, or the previous one with Jacob. So, Joseph's life. There we go. Joseph's entire life is one long trail of evidence demonstrating how God uses the best and worst circumstances to turn his life into something beautiful and useful. That was a lot to read. Joseph's life, though, his entire life, is made up of evidence demonstrating that God is using the good and using the bad, using the best and worst circumstances to make his life into something amazing. How do we know? Like, what can we see? What can we take from Joseph and kind of apply to our own lives today? A couple of things. One, don't judge your circumstances too soon. Don't judge your circumstances too soon. Because you and Joseph may be looking at a few years of difficulty, and if you give up too soon, you will miss out on what God has for you. Being faithful means pushing through. It means staying true. It means following even when things don't look good. That's a hard one, I think. It's a hard one. Because how many of you would say that you are great at patience? That you love any opportunity to exercise your patient gift? You relish it, you look forward, you ask for it, like, yes, give me more stoplights. I am so good at waiting. The only reason you love red lights is because you text at red lights.
That's not true.
Which isn't waiting. When we judge our situation too quickly, we miss out on what God is doing. He is there. Kind of like that buzzing noise we were laughing about earlier. This constant thing that's going on in the background, whether you hear it or not, He's there. God is there. God is present. That's the second thing that we can take from Joseph's life is no matter what you do, no matter where you are, no matter what you're thinking, no matter what you're involved in, that's a little scary, right? God is there. God is there. This isn't one of those, you better be good because God is watching kind of things. No, this is to remind us that when things are difficult, when things are tough, when things are great, God is there with you in the hardship and the difficulties. He's there with you in the celebration and the good things. He is there because He loves you. He wants to experience these things with you. He wants you to experience these things with Him. And His name is Emmanuel, God with us. Why in the world would the God of the universe want to be with you? Because He loves you. He loves the good parts about you. He loves the bad parts about you. He says, I'm going to help you with the bad parts. Trust me. God is there. He's with you. You can trust Him even in the darkest circumstances. If Joseph's life, his entire life, was one long trail of evidence demonstrating how God uses the best and worst circumstances to turn his life into something beautiful and useful. And if we take Joseph as an example and do what he did, then our lives, our entire life, also is one long trail of evidence demonstrating how God uses the best and worst circumstances to turn our lives into something beautiful and useful. Believe it or not, God is working already to make your life beautiful. Many of you can look back on a time when you could say, your life was pretty ugly. And you've seen a huge change in your lives. I'm one. There are things that I wish I had never ever done. I wish that I could go back and, get rid of it. But when I walk around now thinking about all of that and worrying about all of that and taking all of that on and going, oh God, He's like, dude, I've forgiven you. I've forgiven you. I've made you new. I am making your life beautiful. In my ugly days, and I have some, ask my family. In my ugly days, when I'm not patient, kind, self-sacrificing, when I'm not those things, I can trust that God is making me beautiful in the worst and the best circumstances. I'm not done yet. He's not done with me yet. It's okay. So when you have an ugly day, trust that He is still working in you to make your life beautiful and useful. All it takes is faith. Trust Him. Because Joseph is a great character to study. But it's really easy to say, well, that's Joseph and I'm me. Joseph's life was beautiful, and it was useful, and it was filled with faith in God's favor. But you know what? So is yours. And God is making your life beautiful. He's making it beautiful. He's making it something that he can put up and say, see, that's my man, that's my woman. I'm creating in him and her a new heart, a new life. And I'm giving them hope and a future. And he will put in your life the opportunity to be useful for him. And it might be something as simple as a smile or an encouraging word. It might be something bigger as you giving up your kidney for someone. I don't know. I hope I don't have to give up my kidney. But you can be sure of this. That God is making your life new. Every day, he's making your life new. Every day. The only thing that we have to do to be part of that is accept him. Say, God, Jesus, I need you. I want you. I don't understand everything about all of this stuff, but I believe that there's something to it. And I want to know more. I want to learn more about you. I want you to come into my life, and I want you to help me. I want you to make my life beautiful. I want you to make me useful. I want you to give me a new life, a life that can start completely over and completely new. I know there's so many things that I need to be sorry for. I know there's so much more potential out there for me to live my life like you. And I accept your offer of forgiveness and eternity. It's that simple. And if you start there, then you too can trust God. He's going to continue to make your life beautiful, make your life useful, and make your life new as you follow him. Let's pray.